this morning. It's a real honor to be able to present at SOMA at all, especially with such an esteemed audience. So thank you all for your time. As was introduced, Kyle and I both work for Force Ukraine. Some of our other team members who go to Ukraine with us are in the front. We got back about a week ago from our 7th trip out to theater. And one of the things that we've noticed, especially since we both came up through the GWAT world, is how categorically different the paradigm is out there. So we'd like to take about 30 minutes of your time and talk about some of the things that we've seen. And again, one of the things that's very important when we talk about Ukraine is that I have a singular optic on this problem. Kyle has a different optic. If you really want to know what's going on, there are some ladies and gentlemen sitting about halfway back in this room who live this, breathe this every single day like we used to. They are the experts on this. We are merely an intermediary who has kind of iterative access to a very challenging problem.
Okay,
So with that, I'd like to get into our presentation. Did you bring it? I did not. Hey. So far, so good. If you'll indulge us, we would be remiss in not mentioning a friend of our team and a friend of Ukraine who was killed doing demining operations 2 days ago. Who's been active in Ukraine since 2014. A true friend to Ukraine, somebody that we admire greatly. Chris Swampy Garrett was killed doing demining outside the Izium area 2 days ago. Disclosures, again, like somebody else said the other day, we wish we had any. We are a tiny 501c3 that does this all on fundraising. So if you guys know the rich people who are downstairs in the conference room or downstairs in the expo, you want to shake them upside down and scoop up their loose change, I will take that. Past that, I have no disclosures. So we've heard a lot of talk about Ukraine and understanding good fundamentals, and a lot of that talk is kind of in the ether. One of the things that we like to do when we lay it out is help us really contextualize the problem, because I think there's been a lot of, again, singular optic look on this. Ukraine is an incredibly challenging problem set in any way you want to slice it, whether that's specific, medical, tactical, logistical. As an example, it is the second largest country in Europe. It is about the size of Texas for you Americans who need contextual clues. And it's extremely large from west, where you can get into the country, to east, where the preponderance of the fighting is. 1,300 kilometers across, basically. That means, because there's no airspace that's available, that if you want to get into Ukraine, generally speaking, our team, we fly to Poland from Colorado. That takes a night. We get to Poland, make sure we have another night so that all our gear gets there, because that's how we get stuff into country. We then take a train down to the border, another 19-hour train out to Dnipro, and then we get an SUV to go farther forward from that. So for those of you doing the math, that's at least 4 or 5 days to get from central U.S. to basically several kilometers off the fly. That impacts everything you do. So when you think about how you do resupply, how you do troop rotation, how you do any sort of manning, time and distance tyranny is real. And while we're talking about Ukraine, and I've heard some complaints in this particular SOMA that there's a lot about Ukraine, and maybe it's a little passé. If you don't want to hear specifically about Ukraine, extrapolate this out to some unnamed island chain in the South Pacific, and the same problems apply. You'll have the same tyranny of distance, you'll have the same austere conditions, you will not have air superiority, and you will have an enemy that is as good or better than you are at almost everything. Further complicating this problem, Ukraine currently has approximately 1,000-kilometer front line, 600 miles for the Americans in the room. A huge and dynamic fought to try and control. And as we've seen across, troop movements in one location may mean a shortage in troops somewhere else. So again, when you think about how you man, rotate, ensure that every place is covered with everything that you need, from combat troops to trauma surgeons who are going to take care of those guys, how do you possibly cover this distance? Okay. So then you have an enemy that's currently making relatively good advancements across all 3 fronts, up in the northeast corner, in the east, where the preponderance of the fighting is happening in Donbass, and then down in the south around Kherson and Mykolaiv. The last point, which we want to emphasize here, is that the pace of the drone evolution is such that it is making everything else significantly more challenging. We hear this all the time from our Ukrainian friends, and again, thank you for being here. But the evolution just from last year, where we went from seeing things that might have a thermal capability or a night vision capability, to the same time this year, where they're now flying fiber optic drones, say 40-kilometer radius, and have a 3 to 5 kilometer control past the fly. Makes everything more challenging. Where do you put your surgical resuscitation? Where do you put your rule 1? When 3 to 5 kilometers past the fighting is still under control of an aerial threat.
So the way we wanted to kind of contextualize this in this audience is to take the 5 soft truths, turn them into the medical soft truths, and then talk about lessons that we've seen in Ukraine and bring them into this conversation in a way that I think we can all begin to understand. All right, so the first thing that we tell ourselves in the soft world is that humans are more important than hardware. And that's nice until the hardware is so overwhelmingly pervasive and so easy to produce and has an autonomous AI capability to it. Right there, the level of influence that AI is having on this war cannot be stated enough. When we left our last mission in December and then got back in March, we came back to the same geographic war, but a very different technical war. Right? We went from, oh man, these fiber optic drones are like cool and a new thing, to we have fiber optic drones that are going 40 kilometers and have installed AI. Like they just get launched and left, and they go find a target and hit it. Right? This is not the way the Americans think about it. Right? It's like, oh, we want to do human in the loop AI. Our enemy does not give a crap. Right? Like they will happily take hardware over humans in a way that we will not. They will take a mistake by AI hitting their own guys and be like, mistakes happen, oh well, and they'll move on, right? In a way that we will not. And so one of the things that I think we really need to understand is that the way that AI is changing this. We talk about prolonged field care, and I see Major Merkel standing here in the corner with his opening remarks on PFC and the bridge to nowhere, right? You've got to, I think, no offense, sir, but I think maybe you back up the PFC conversation, right? And PFC is a POI conversation. Right? PFC starts when your buddy gets injured, not at some point when you stumble into it after we do T-Trex. I think that's one of those big lessons that you've got to take away when we talk about humans and hardware and the way that this particular battle, this particular war is changing that. We talk about quality being better than quantity, and that is that's absolutely true, right? We will all subscribe to that, except that that's not the way we actually behave, right? We are teaching skills. We're teaching how to do things, not what to think, and we're not teaching the whys, right? We're teaching the whats. Like, what do I do? Well, I see this, I do this. Why? Because I was told to. Because it was on a checklist. Because I got tested on it. Right? One of my buddies in 10th group has a thing he loves doing to the new Deltas who come into group, right, brand new Delta out of the schoolhouse, takes them out, gives them a single casualty, usually under night when it's nice and cold and dark, and it has some extra stress factors, right? But it is a single gunshot wound to the inguinal with a downside exit, right? And in that single wound pattern, he can sit there and he will tell you every mistake that Delta will make through the entire assessment over a 40-minute lane to a T. And he'll bet a case of beer with anybody that he can identify everyone in order. How do we know? How is he able to do that? It's because our schoolhouse teaches us how to do a thing, right? It teaches us what to do and isn't really leaning deeply into these whys, right? And that is a massive problem that we need to get past. We need to start leaning deeper into living the fundamentals of critical thinking not just the fundamentals of skills, right, that need to be performed. Like, cool, you know how to do a crike. That's awesome, right? Do you know the proper indications and contraindications? The number of times that we go out there and we put a crike neck trainer, a wearable trainer, on somebody, and they get cut because they're wearing the trainer. It's like 99.9% of the time. I've seen one guy not do it, right? It's, and it applies to partner forces as much as it applies to our own force. If we think we're better than that, like, you need to take a step back and have a good hard look at how we're doing training here in the States as well.
Just a quick side note, all the pictures that you've seen thus far have come from one of our recent trips. That first one was literally drone production garage, where drones are being 3D printed. This one is from one of the many realities in Ukraine. This is a training base for those of you who actually know the problem. But this is a very common type of fighting, especially along the front, with this trench warfare. And as we talked about earlier, with the size of the front line and the pace of the attrition, medics cannot be mass produced, nor can trauma surgeons, nor can assaulters. We were talking, both of us came up during the big surge into Iraq when we built a additional Trident squadron and an additional Sabre squadron. How do you do that? If you think it's hard to build an assault squadron, think about how much harder it is to man across a 600-mile front line, or across, again, some unnamed island chain. The reason we bring this up is because it's very hard to overstate what the pace of attrition does across an extended flight. We talked about it a little bit in terms of what it does in terms of your ability to man, equip, move people. Some of our team members were in east of Izium, which is out in the eastern part of the country. And we were training the 25th Brigade in March of 2024. And we were supposed to have them until Friday for a full week. We had their medics with us. And on Thursday morning they came and they said, we have to cancel the rest of training because we've been sent back and we're going today. Or tomorrow rather, they were leaving on Friday. We then went back and saw the remnants of the 25th Brigade in August of the same year. And they told us that in the interim, basically from end of March until August, they lost 80% of their brigade. That is to fatalities, wounds, and people who just didn't want to see how this was going to play out. How many of you have been in a unit where you've suffered 80% attrition? How many of you have been in a unit where you've suffered 10% attrition? Okay. The common numbers we hear across Ukraine is attrition of somewhere between 30 and 80% for any given unit across any given part of this conflict. And again, I would defer to my Ukrainian friends who are sitting in the middle. And they are the experts on this, but again, we are just retelling things that we've heard from medevac medics, from TACMED folks, from people who are in this fight directly. And so when you think about, we're very good at assuming that the things that we've always done, the 16-week 68 whiskey program, the 18-month 18 Delta program, we'll just have more of those and we'll be able to produce these folks. It simply isn't true. Right? And it's not true because when you're constantly plugging gaps, you don't have time to do training. The other part of that story that I just told about the 25th is that on Wednesday, a young man, maybe in his 20s, came up and he said, I've just been told I'll be the medic for this next assault. What can you teach me before we go? They left 24 hours later. And we talked to him. I said, what's your medical background? He says, I don't have any. I don't know why I became a medic. And we've had numbers of cases where we're asked to come and teach guys for maybe 6 hours or maybe a few days.
I think about him all the time.
And told that that's all they're going to get before they have to go and plug holes across that flood. And when we think about how we're going to do this, we've had interesting conversations across the week about how we prioritize certain things in a GWAT context. Things like blood and things like helicopters and these magical answers that we've always come to rely on over the last 20 years, a whole generation of us. Or if you think about medics who turn over every 4 to 7 years in the operational sphere, 3 generations. how do we go back to reprioritizing just getting people back in the fight as opposed to trying to save everybody? And I hate to be that blunt about it, but when we go into something like this, our ability to save everyone because we've got an amazing trauma system that we've adapted to us just won't work anymore.
Just kind of drive that home, right? Jim Zarnick, just Jim, as he likes to go. Right, gave his conversation on winning in a complex world. It's on the Belong Field Care podcast. If you haven't heard it, go listen to it. One of the best talks you will ever hear on the topic. But his point, is that at some point, the system becomes overwhelmed, right? And how do you deal with an overwhelmed system? Something we haven't had to ever deal with, because we took Iraq and Afghanistan and we adapted that environment. We just went, we own everything. We're just going to set up the greatest trauma system ever known to the world. That is not an option that we will have in the future. And so the fourth truth, right, that competent medics can be created after an emergency occurs, right? We are, as has been talked about multiple times here, right, we are living the water, right? We are, bluntly, we are part of the problem. Right, we've taken T-C, we've exported T-C and those guidelines as if there's some kind of gospel, and we've not contextualized them to the problem that they face. T-C does not work in LISCO, right, as it's currently formulated. And it absolutely needs to be rethought. It needs to be reformed. Right? The picture that's on the screen right now is a gentleman who lost his arm. Right? That tourniquet had been on at that point for 9 hours. Right, he was, and this was just a normal event. Right, this was just standard. This is, in the Ukrainian terms, normal. Right, like this is every day. This is Tuesday. Right, tourniquet's on 9 hours. Gets back to the stopping. They finally put all the clothes back, you see the arm there. Not a single wound. Nothing is wrong with that limb. He lost his arm because T-C says blood-soaked clothes are an indicator for a tourniquet. And they were trained that T-C says blood-soaked clothes, so they saw blood-soaked clothes, it was his buddy's blood. And they put it on and it stayed on. Right? Those types of deficiencies are not being discussed as openly as they should. We are not addressing them, we are not making those changes. Right? One of the recommendations we would have is that we need to consider, either taking tourniquets out entirely on the front, not entirely completely, but out of the front, or training our individual, right, our ASM level guys all the way up, that every time you put on a tourniquet, that is an intervention of convenience until you prove to me otherwise. So you prove to me that you actually need that tourniquet. It is merely an intervention of convenience because you didn't have time to do an assessment because, right, you're under drone threat, you're under active fire. I saw blood, I just needed something. And then when I get back, my first priority is not, hey, I'm going to reassess. My first priority is, I'm going to convert or reduce this tourniquet, if at all possible. Right? These are, I think, conversations, these are things that we're seeing that our Ukrainian friends are living, right? And their friends are living each and every day. Again, like I said, I'd encourage you to go talk to the real experts in the room, right? We're happy to give our optic, but right, we're seeing just a little bit of what's happening in this broader problem, just trying to elevate the conversation.
This should be self-evident, given what we talked about before. We think about it from our singular optic as the medic, the person on the ground who has these problems. If we go back to that first slide, we think about how dependent we are on all of those people who support us. How do we get resupply? How do we ensure that we have the things that we need to do the things that we need to do? And the problem and the truth is, you won't have those things. Your medic on the ground or your surgical team will have to do more with less. And it may not be because you have overwhelming casualties, which you will. It may be because you can't get resupply, because there is no air, and you're reliant on a boat to bring you something. or you're reliant on somebody to drive 1,000 kilometers, or in some cases, as happens in Ukraine, you are crowdfunding for the things that your unit needs. And you're hoping that some nice donor didn't go to Amazon and buy the cheapest, worst tourniquets they could find, but have found something for you, and they send it to you via the Nova Posta, so you can pick it up after you've evacuated your casualty. That's how the real world works. There aren't helicopters coming in and helping you out. There are a couple in Ukraine. We saw one come over us. For the first time in 3 years, I had a helicopter come over me on this trip. And it scared the shit out of me. Because I didn't know what it was anymore. Right? But when we talk about learning this problem, it goes past talking to the guys who are here, the experts who are sitting in the middle of the room. It goes to talking to the loggies, the pilots. How are we going to do this? How are we actually going to do good medicine in bad places, to use a catchphrase, if we can't get the stuff that we need? Because all the people we depend on, the guys who fly the ISR for us, who can't because there's an EW threat, the pilots who come to get us who can't because they'll get shot down. Now how are we going to do it? And how are we going to do it well? So I challenge all of you to get past the American hubris of, if we can't do T-Tri-C, we'll just do T-Tri-C harder, which is the answer in a lot of cases right now, right? What have we done? We've expanded how much T-Tri-C we're doing. We've now made it 10 days long. We haven't learned the context under which we are going to need to do it. The only way to do that is by being willing to learn from our partners. It's being willing to sit down and talk to them and say, how do we take what we know to be best practice medicine, which it absolutely is, and make it contextually appropriate to the fight that other people are in? Because if you can't do that, the stuff that we're talking about, and I think the thing that sticks with me is we were on one of our early trips and somebody said, T-Tri-C says the only thing I should do in the red zone is apply a tourniquet. Well, where does the red zone end when a tank is shooting at me? Or where does the red zone end when we've got drones coming in on us for the next 8 or 24 hours? If all you do is a tourniquet in those situations, you don't even think about conversion. You don't even think about PFC, as Kyle was talking about. You are stuck in a paradigm that no longer works. And the only way we start to change that paradigm is by being humble enough to learn from other people's experiences. Too often we see groups and other folks who go into Ukraine and other places and say, we are here to teach you T-Tri-C because it is the gold standard. We must back off of that. We must go, here we are here to teach you best practice medicine, but help us understand how this is going to work in the environment that you are in. And that is how we will enact real change. And that is how we will get better. And while I'm heartened to hear, into the 4th year into this war in Ukraine, I hear, oh, we're so glad these conversations are happening. We are 3 years past the change that we should be making already. And again, I have no credibility in this room. I get that. Most of you don't know me, and that's fine. But I hope that you listen. And I really hope that you listen to the Ukrainians who are in this war. And I hope that you listen to other folks who have iterative presence there. I see a lot of you in this room who have ground experience. And I hope that you are continually willing to share that experience so that we can all get better. Because that's really what we need. Again, we'll open it for questions. I know we have a few minutes, but I know this is controversial. I know that what we're saying flies in the face of the paradigm that we have come to really believe to be true, and it is. Right? We took an amazing system, and we adapted that over the course of 20 years, and we saved many of our friends using it. And what I'm encouraging you to do now is make that leap of faith, build something new, to learn the lessons that are evident in places like this, so that we don't have the same shortfalls that we're seeing in other places. We have the time to get better, and that time is now. But the only way we do that is by being humble, by listening to our Ukrainian friends, by listening to other people who are doing this in other places. Lots of good talks out there about Burma. Lots of good talks out there about the Philippines. There's good information out there if we're willing to listen to it. So thank you for listening to us for the last half hour. And if there's questions, otherwise our contact information is there. We're here for the rest of the day. The pitchforks and torches are in the back. Kyle and I are going to take a 2-minute head start about this door. Yes, sir.
Hey, great talk, guys. Dr. Rob Mabry. And I agree with pretty much everything that you were saying. So a lot of the stuff on tourniquets, same thing happened in World War I, right? Prevent and conscripts as fast as you can into the Riker. They don't get good first aid training. Tourniquets get applied. 18-hour evacuation chain. And the doc says, I got to take this kid's leg off. Somebody put a tourniquet on. Tourniquets are bad. Instruments the devil. Last resort, all that kind of stuff. They wrote the textbooks because they're back in the rear. They're not up front. They don't see the ones that die, superficial femoral artery, didn't use tourniquet. And it's hardly given that you have 6 hours to train somebody before they're literally the ones in the front, right? And so that's definitely a challenge. I think I agree with the second point about, we need to focus more on the tourniquet conversion. It's always been in there, but we haven't had exercise in here anymore because, everyone is less than an hour away from World War II, right? The drone threat is really concerning. How do you think the drone threat affects evacuation? And if you can be specific, because we're talking knocking ambulance exchange points, roll 1, roll 2, with a nice line of block diagram going back to the rear. I think this is like the Spanish Civil War was before World War II. And so, a lot of the blitzkrieg lessons, they were learned in the late 1930s here in the Spanish Civil War, and people that were paying attention kind of saw the future of warfare, and I think we're seeing it here in Ukraine as well. So, our way of fighting with medevac and, nice little clean lines of ambulance exchange points, it's not going to happen. And so, especially with the context of evacuation, you got to comment on that. I appreciate your thoughts. How, if we have the stomach to lose that brigade, 8% of brigade in a week, and then in volunteer force, that's a whole different discussion in the United States, right? So I'm not sure we can do that. But if you can comment specifically on evacuation and the effect of drones, I would appreciate it.
Yeah. So I think a couple of things on on that. I completely agree. I don't think the American public has the stomach to take that kind of loss from our fighting force at this point. But I think the impact of drones is twofold for me, and I'll let Mike jump in on this. One, it changes the way you do evacuation. Right, these guys are setting up intentional diversionary vehicles. They are marking vehicles as CASEVAC or with the cross because they know they're going to get targeted, and they are driving them in one direction, and then they are dumping as many people as they possibly can into another vehicle. No treatment, literally just as many bodies as I can get in there, and they are driving in different directions.
Non-standard vehicles, not that.
Yeah, right. Like this is the back of a pickup. This is a Hilux, right? Like, this is you're grabbing whatever vehicle you can, and so one is non-standard platforms. Two is non-standard locations for CCPs. Right? You need to revisit, and I get that like the irregular warfare thing has blown up, and everyone wants to talk about the IW world, right? IW is a very broad spectrum. Let's just talk about UW. UW in a conventional fight, because you're going to need it if you want to be able to treat people anywhere close to the front.
Barns and basements.
100%. But barns and basements that are well concealed, where your generator's not sitting outside, where you're not covering your generator with styrofoam and then it blows up on you because you tried to cover the key signature, and then forgot that, oh wait, there's other, right? There are a lot of lessons that are being learned on the UW in a conventional fight that I don't think we're paying very close attention to, and those would be the things that I think drones have changed in the way that we do medicine, even in what we would call a conventional fight.
The only thing I would add, I know we're into this gentleman's time, is
Sorry, Eric.
a couple minutes. What the drones do is it's hard to overstate. So currently, again, last September rather, we're hearing that the standard evac time for CASEVAC team to get in and get casualties was between 8 and 72 hours. On this trip, just several months later, we're hearing that sometimes it's now up to 2 weeks. And part of the reason why that is because of this pervasive drone threat. It's not just attacking the guys that are in the trench, and it's doing such in a waved manner that now gives you, when we think about things like, tourniquet conversion, we should be able to do this in the 2-hour mark. Under what circumstance and context are you willing to be out there doing conversion or taking blood from somebody when you know that the drone waves are coming in every couple minutes? Then you have the drones that follow the CASEVAC vehicles, specifically so that they can identify where those things are going, and then wait until until a surgical team shows up, and then they'll hit the stab point. And so what the drones are doing is providing not just an ISR capability, but a pervasive, smart bomb threat, precision munitions. And just so everyone in the room understands the scope of this problem, Ukraine is on pace to build 2.5 million drones this year. How many do you think China's building? How fast do you think they could spin up that production if they had to? So this idea that we're going to have, and I heard this, within 100 days we're going to have air dominance, we're going to be able to fly, and we're just going to keep our same casualty acquisition with 47s on this land, that we've somehow gained. Takes out the fact that an $80 drone produced in somebody's garage that takes out 147 means we will never fly another one, because that's what we do. So air dominance of the past is no longer a thing, guys. If it can be overcome by a drone or a drone swarm, we can't rely on it anymore.
Thank you, gentlemen.